Oh.
Hey there.
Hello, Mr. Kohlton.
How you doing?
Dude, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Just do you want to like maybe we'll start by just like telling the people like what you're doing, like what you do, and maybe I
Sure.
don't know, like Discord stuff. Yeah, whatever. Floors yours for a minute.
Okay. Yeah. So I am a entrepreneur and business owner. I own Credenzio Studios, which is a online video game making company that operates on Roblox.com. And I hire or I work with contracted workers, and I have about 60 people in the company, volunteers, and contracted workers who help me create a medieval MMORPG. And on the side, I also run a production called A Beautiful Life, which is oriented towards helping people find meaning and purpose in their lives. And also is kind of just was started in a way to, it was kind of just started as a way to be whatever it needed to be in the landscape. So to adapt to whatever it needed to be. So recently it's been a little slowed down, not as many podcasts or newsletters, but that's somewhat because of my heavy involvement with Credenzio Studios and how busy I've been with that. But I actually recently started an academy alongside my studio that teaches kids how to make their own games and develop games on the Roblox platform and other platforms. And we also do a leadership class there. And I talk a lot about the principles I like in A Beautiful Life, and I talk a lot about Peterson stuff. I talk a lot about just different philosophy and things, and sort of how to help people in that way. So I teach that every week.
Okay. So what I like wasn't aware that you were involved in that. So you're like leading by example as far as that goes. Like your output on A Beautiful Life is due to you kind of making that. Yeah. Okay. Oh, so is the Emma, your morning routine, is that going like strong? Like I remember watching
Yeah.
a video you did. Like have you like tweaked it, or what's been like that process?
So I've been doing my morning routine actually in 15 or on February 15th. It would have been 2 years in a row without missing a day of my morning routine, which is, whatever, 730 days straight, I believe, of the morning routine. And so I started off, my dad read a book called The Miracle Morning, and he started to implement it in his company. And I was working for the company a few years back, and I heard about it. And essentially, no, that's okay. Essentially, with the morning routine, I'm sorry, let me restart. Okay. So he read this book, The Miracle Morning, and he started doing his morning routine. And I think he's on day like 1200 or so straight of doing it. And the book talks about the importance of having a routine. Peterson talks about that too. But most importantly, doing it in the morning and like different strategies. It's kind of a short book. I didn't read it. I just decided when I was studying abroad in Italy that I wanted to do a morning routine because, I've always wanted to read and meditate and do all these things, but I never found time to prioritize it throughout the day because you wake up, or I would wake up, I'd look at my phone for 30 minutes and then roll out of bed just at the right time to go do whatever my obligation was for the day. And then by the time I was done with my obligations, whether that was school or work, I was too drained to do things like meditate or read. And that would just become an excuse, or work out, right? So instead of me prioritizing those things, they just got pushed back. And so I started with a really small routine in Italy. It was like an hour tops. And I would basically just meditate for 5 minutes, read very briefly, do a little bit of journaling, and I would go on a run or do a workout. And eventually over the next 6 months, it got to the point where it was 4 or 5 hours long. And that's when I made that video on my channel, my 4-hour morning routine. And it was including, you know, an extensive 2-hour workout, reading for an hour, journaling, all those things. And now my routine, it fluctuates from 4 to 5 hours still. Anything longer, it just is not ideal. I'm waking up at 5 a.m. every day, which is great. I finally got my sleep schedule under control, and I just do that consistently every day. I wake up at 5 a.m. The first thing I do is I get right out of bed. I don't linger in bed at all. My phone's across the room. The alarm's across the room, so there's no chance of sleeping in. I get up and I have to turn the alarm off, or else my girlfriend will get mad. So I have to run across. I wash my face with some cold water. I go downstairs. I do my journaling. I journal about my dream. I journal about what I did the day before. I journal affirmations, goals, resolutions, and I do that every day, and that takes maybe 20 minutes. And then I get on my computer briefly, and I do some Rosetta Stone for Italian, learning Italian. And then I do plant studies. I'm learning about local native plants in the area, edible and wild plants. So I do that for another 15 minutes. And then after that, I read for like 45 minutes. I'm reading like 5 different books. And after that, I meditate for 15 minutes. And then I do yoga for about 10 minutes. And then I work out and run and do cardio for about 2 hours. And then I go take a cold shower. And then the routine's over. So ideally by 8:30 at the earliest, I would say, and at the latest 10 o'clock, I'm done with my routine and ready to start working for the day. But I've been mixing it up. So it's not to rant too long about it, but it's interesting because I've had troubles with it just becoming too stale. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because you want habits to be stale. For example, when the alarm goes off at 5 a.m., even though I'm tired and miserable some days, I just find my legs moving to get out of bed because the habit's so ingrained. It's not even like it's a choice. It's just doing it automatically. But still, it kind of, when you're doing something with intent, it has a lot better power than if it doesn't have intent. For example, meditation. So I've been falling asleep during my meditations for the last 8 months. Every single time almost, I just fall asleep because it's early in the morning and I'm exhausted. And usually when I'm not moving or doing something, I fall asleep. So just today, as a little adaptation, I just like, well, I'm just going to stand up when I meditate now so I don't fall asleep. So little tweaks like that I do all the time. Or another thing I did this week was I decided to do, before my workout and before my cardio or whatever, I'll do an hour of the most tedious tasks of work I have for that day. So whether that's programming, employee management, things that I have to do every day, but I don't necessarily enjoy. And it's like I was saying earlier, it's one of those things that if you put off, you're just never going to want to do them. I'm never going to want to do these things at 4 p.m. at the end of a long day of work. So I just get them done right away. And that's been great this week. So I make little tweaks to it all the time, but I've not missed a day as far as doing some form of the routine.
Dude, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, one thing the way I kind of like I was doing a little morning routine for a minute. I've also found that if like, I don't know why I feel like I have more energy after. Well, sometimes it's like I feel like I have more energy after work, and I don't know if like it's like sometimes when you're drained, it's like, and you're off work, so there's like a little bit of a like endorphin kick, and that's, I sort of like would use that to like do some form of like exercise, but definitely it's not as it's not as efficient, definitely, as just like doing these things.
Well, I think everybody has their own, that's the thing. It's like when I teach my leadership class, you know, I always recommend that the routine's in the morning because generally I think that it's harder to maintain a routine that's not at the same time every day. And typically the easiest thing to do is wake up earlier before your obligations than to assume that your obligations won't take all day. So I think that, but you know, I do routines in the afternoon. For example, I do like a quick 10-minute ab workout every afternoon right during that, because I fast every day for about 20 hours. And right during that slump in the middle of the day when I'm extra hungry and you kind of right around the 12 to 2 o'clock hour, right when it's basically like starting now for me, where you get a little bit of brain fog, you're not as alert. And I find that little endorphin release to be extremely powerful. And it just takes 10 minutes to work out. And then I'll go hop in. We have one of those indoor like portable saunas, which is great. My sister's lending to me. And I go jump in that for 30 minutes and I just, I get covered in sweat, tons of endorphins come out, and then I take a cold shower again. And after that, I'm ready to go. And that's way better to me than just sitting at my computer, staring at the monitor, like wishing that I had the capacity to do what I needed to do. I'd much rather just go, like you said, get an endorphin release. And especially after a long day of work, the thing I would recommend most for people, you get that feeling when you come home from work or school and you just feel drained and you just like don't want to do anything. The best thing you can do is go work out because it gets your body moving and that feeling goes away.
Right. Either I usually like if I'm, I don't know, when I get off work, I usually feel like I'm more energized, and that might be my like biology or whatever. I definitely, yeah. Either, I don't know. And that's okay. So I think it might just be that like I'm utilizing like rewarding, like an emotional reward for myself, and then using the good feelings from that reward to like do other things. And then it's also like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just
you probably feel good because you're done working, and that's somewhat energizing. I understand that. Yeah. It's weird how energy cycles work, man. It just depends on your circadian rhythms, what time you wake up. Some people wake up at different times every day. And their circadian rhythms are really messed up and their energy cycles are messed up. But other people, like my girlfriend, she just likes to stay up late at night to do her work because she gets a huge burst of energy at about 8 p.m. And I experienced that too. The problem with me is that if I start working at 8 p.m., well, there's no way I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. And I think there's something to do with like some hunter-gatherer adaptation that if you stay up past a certain point when the sun goes down, your body assumes you're keeping watch for the night, and it assumes you're pulling an all-nighter for the tribe, and therefore it gives you that extra energy boost. But when I'm most productive is usually right in the morning, right when I get on for work, or when I'm programming early, like I've been doing this week. That's when I'm most productive. I'm not distracted. The day hasn't worn on me yet. And I guess it just depends. I always feel most of the day, I feel good enough to go work out, right? I feel physically energized, but mentally I can get really drained from so much work on the computer and so much communication between with employees and workers, and all day you getting tons of messages from so many different people. Having to manage that can be very draining. And going in and getting a workout in is one of the best ways to conquer that.
Yeah. No, it definitely takes more energy to do that sort of like just like all the administrative stuff that you're doing, and like keeping a good like attitude or state of mind. It's got to be like, definitely has to be like crucial, I think, for like just when there's such a bulk of tasks that need to like get done.
Absolutely. And task management is something that you can always get better at. And it's one of those things. I love when Peterson says this is, you wouldn't believe how efficient people can get. And I found that with myself. I just getting, like I have a list right here that I write down every day. I have 2 checklists. I have a checklist on my phone that has a lot of my routine stuff on it that I do every day. And then I have a checklist that's just personalized for the day. And just things like that. You're just amazed when you can actually externalize the things in your head and manifest them into something physical that you can hold yourself accountable with. How much easier it is, rather than just saying in your head, oh, I should go work out today. oh, I should fill out those forms today. I should apply for that job. Well, if it's just in your head, you can forget about that. You can push that to the side.
It's one more concrete thing. Your brain, when you write it down, your brain says, oh, this must be a little bit more important than something like that's just in your head. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not, when you have that checklist there, that's holding you accountable, and it's something that you can't rationalize because you wrote it there. You wrote down, I'm going to get this done today. Not I'm going to get this done today if I feel like it. Not I'm going to get this done today unless something unexpected happens. No, this is the checklist I wrote. And at the end of the day, and the next day when I'm flipping it over, I can hold myself accountable for what I didn't get done. And the next day, try to get a higher percentage done than I did the day before. And so there's no limit to how much you can improve yourself in that way. And there's always little strategies and techniques. And personally, I try to mix things up every couple months. I'll find something that really gets me productive and going well, and then it'll get a little stale, and I'll throw a new element in and try to go between different strategies, because your mind can get used to things and then start to cut corners if you don't mix it up sometimes, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to like maybe get into like the game production business? Because I had no idea like that you were, like how'd you like get into that, and how's that usually go?
Well, so Roblox.com is a platform I've been using since I was 11 years old, or maybe even 9. Right. And I joined in 2009, and it's basically a platform that allows you as the player to also be the creator of the content. So it's sort of like the YouTube of gaming, I would guess would be the comparison. So for example,
like that new Mario thing, is it like Mario Maker, or is it like more on a bigger scale? Or
that's like, I would say, a very
specific.
That would be, that's very specified. So for example, YouTube, right? YouTube provides a platform where other people can make their content. It's an engine, essentially. It's a video uploading engine and search engine that allows you to sort through videos and post videos. So YouTube isn't making YouTube videos. They make less than 0.001% of YouTube videos is made by YouTube, the company. They rely on content creators like my brother, right? Like sorting myself out, like Jordan Peterson. Those are the people they rely on for you. All right. I don't know where it's being stored, but we are recording now.
Okay. Yeah. Tables are turned.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, no. Thank you, dude. So I was going to, so where we stopped, I was going to ask you more about games. Actually, one just quick question is, what is your favorite Assassin's Creed?
My favorite Assassin's Creed game? It's a hard question. I think the first one is my favorite because of the historical context, which is the same time period my game's set in. It's set during the Third Crusade. But play-wise, I think Brotherhood is the one that I probably like the most as far as gameplay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a very niche answer.
Well, I've gotten it a lot. I've gotten that question a lot.
So you left off with basically like you were listing off the departments. I don't know if you want to go like more into that.
Sure. So the company's made up of a bunch of different departments that we all have to come together within our separate niches within game development, whether it's 3D design or programming or many other things, to come together and make a game. And we service about 3,000 users already, about 3,000 active members in our community. We have 2,700 in the Discord, so about 3,000 in the community. And we, at any time, we have anywhere from 20 to 160 people playing the game at any time. However, we'd like to get those numbers more up to 20,000. And so we're doing all the things we can to try to expand those. We're in what's called an open beta right now, which essentially is just The game's not finished, but you can play it. So people can go play it now. It's called the Third Crusade Reforged on Roblox.com. So if you search the Third Crusade Reforged Roblox, it should pop up.
Dude, that is awesome. And I'll link that if you want also.
Sure, thank you. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, yeah. No, it sounds cool. Do you want to like explain like kind of where, like, I don't know, the game's set in like Crusades?
Yeah, so it's set during the Third Crusade. You as the player get to have the choice between serving and fighting for Crusaders or anti-Crusaders. So you can be a Saracen, you could be a Templar, you could be a Hospitaller, you could be an assassin, you could be a Seljuk Turk, you could be, Arabian Knight, all these different things that sort of comprise what we call factions within the Third Crusade. And so we have 16 different factions, and you can choose which one to join, and they have these huge battles, and they conquer territory and land. Currently, our game is larger than the size of Skyrim, the Elder Scrolls. So it's super big. I've spent 7 years making it. Tons of area to explore. Almost all the area is conquerable by the factions. So factions forge alliances. You join in, you become a low rank, you work your way up. You can craft and mine and harvest resources to get better weapons and become more skilled. You can trade, you can sell things at the markets, and we're just going to do more and more with the game as time goes on. But that's basically a brief synopsis of it. It's essentially a Mount and Blade, Mordhau mixed with something like EVE Online, Assassin's Creed, Legend of Zelda. It's kind of a hybrid, like For Honor. It's hybrid between all these different things. And it's something that's really revolutionary and new at the same time, something that hasn't really been attempted, not only on Roblox, but in the gaming industry in general.
Dude, is there like an element that's the most like emphasized? Like when I think of like Skyrim, I'm like, okay, so there's, your own development, like your character, and then maybe like story might be like next to that. Like it'd be like, I don't know which one of those elements would be most prominent, but is there like an element that's kind of like just like your draw?
Because it's an MMO, which means multiplayer, basically. We wanted to optimize the user's experience and make it as unique as possible. And no matter how hard a game dev works on creating a story or making an awesome game, which they have, you can go play The Legend of Zelda and you can play it 20 times and you could have fun 20 times, but it's going to be roughly the same experience. What we've decided to do is create, sort of like YouTube and Roblox do, create the context for the player to create the world they want. For example, you get the choice of pursuing whether you want to be in a faction, whether you want to be a merchant, whether you want to be a pilgrim, whether you want to be a religious idol, whether you want to pursue any sort of different things in guilds, whether you want to be a bandit, whether you want to be a rogue. All these things you can naturally choose the path of and change at any time. I mean, there's consequences to changing it, but in very much, we've gone for a very organic and, for lack of a better word, capitalistic system that's completely player driven. And no one's really attempted that with a faction system but EVE Online. So our factions are completely run by the players. So for example, you have the King of France in our game. He's a real person. He can be changed. He can be overthrown in some circumstances. He can step down, and the whole hierarchy within the Kingdom of France has him at the top. So he's very much a celebrity. So instead of it being a game where you enter and you're automatically the king and the hero, no, that's a title you have to earn. And we believe that's actually something that is more desirable. And because when you do earn that status, it's a lot more meaningful than everybody gets to be Link and save Zelda. Well, not necessarily, right? If you become the king, you become a celebrity, and sort of, obviously most people won't become kings, but there's plenty of status roles you can't earn your way into. And when you're in that natural hierarchy, because we've provided the context where the players are deciding what the politics are, The players are forging the alliances. We're not telling them what to do with the alliances. We set very minimal restrictions on what they can and cannot do given historical context. But it's up to the players if France wants to be an ally of England or if they want to be an ally of Germany and the Holy Roman Empire. That's up to the King of France, and he can choose that at any time. So betrayals, alliances, ranking up, getting demoted, these are all things that organically happen that are a lot more original and unique than a pre-scripted plan for a game where every time this happens to the player, every time this is what happens. No, the story is evolving based on what the players decide it is.
Okay. So there's not like one, endpoint. It's kind of like
exactly. There's no endpoint. And we're going to add quests and stuff, so there will be some sort of centralized story, but it's going to be so open and adaptable that you could play it 100 times and not get nearly the same experience either time. But ideally, you have an account, you make an account, and you're that character. And it could take you years to max out in all the different levels. We wanted to make it it's a high barrier to get to the top. But we believe that that's something that's actually very rewarding for players who've been playing for years, because you could play it for years and still get something out of it. You could spend a long time becoming a top-level swordsman, but your archery still might not be top tier even after a long time.
Right.
That forms a natural class system instead of it being something like a game. I'm not sure if Skyrim does this or not.
You're never finished getting better, right?
Sure, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so instead of you saying, oh, I'm going to be a knight, and that's what I am for this character is a knight, and he's a knight, and he's not an archer, he's not any of these. That's not what we're doing. You can choose to be a knight based on your choices in the game and then pick up a bow and be an archer, but if your skill level is lower, you're going to suck. And you might have to spend a long time practicing until you've gotten maxed out in every level, which is going to be very, very difficult. So jobs such as being a blacksmith, which is a skill, or being a cavalry archer, or any of these things are just things that are going to develop organically based on what people are interested in. And to switch from them is going to be difficult because it's not just a subcategory that's listed. It's not like a class where you say, oh, I'm a knight, I'm an archer, I'm a spearman. No, you can be any of these things, but what you're most prolific at skill-wise is going to be determined by what you spend the most time at. So in a battle, we've set it up in a way that the combat system flows. So if you're riding in on a horse, the best thing I could do is pull out a spear to try to stop you. Because if I pull out a sword, it doesn't have the range to stop a horse. So it's a natural class system. However, if I'm more experienced with a sword and my spear does way less damage than my sword, then I might just be screwed against a horse because I'm just not good against those. But for example, if I'm fighting somebody with a spear,
that's really fun to make.
Yeah,
like, sit down and try and organize this
exactly. It's fun, man. It's fun, and it's all supposed to balance and counterbalance each other, and we're still working on all of it. And there's still so much more we want to add. We want to work on it for about the next 2 years at least, and keep adding on to it. It's a very slow process, but this is something that allows me to get up in the morning and strive for. And I couldn't do that at working for somebody else. I couldn't do that in a job that I wasn't passionate about. That just doesn't interest me. So I chose something that I just love talking about, and the thought of it excites me. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. No, that sounds like having something in the morning that you can continually build on, or that is just that's something that excites you. For sure.
Exactly. And there's no end to the amount of stuff we can add. And of course we have to cap it off at some point, but we have no end in mind right now as far as what we want to add to the game and keep enhancing the player's experience and really shatter expectations, because I'm not really interested in a cash grab or something that's expedient. We want to make something that's, something that's beautiful, something that's really valuable.
Yeah. And people can tell when there's layers of the developers in the in the, like, you can tell when there's like care put into a game, and you can see like you can see sort of like the thinking like going on when you're synced, and that's
Absolutely.
yeah, and that's like super exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, no one wants to play a game that doesn't have some spirit in it, right? People can see that. People can tell when it's just a cash grab, and there's no, it's like it's got all the things it should have, or maybe, but there's something missing, something that's kind of inexplicable that really provides that extra element. And we really want to live in that element and find out what it is and use it as much as possible, because without that, it's just, what's the point anyway, man? I mean, if I know a lot of people who come to me to game develop and they say, hey, I'm trying to make this cash grab game. What do you think of this? And then they'll show me something they built. And I'll say, like, it's not good enough to me. It's not good enough to pass as a product to me. It might work to get you some money, but it's not going to sustain. And furthermore, why are you working on something that you think is just a cash grab? What's the point of that? Because those don't work, right? There's no such thing as an overnight success. Like things that are successful take years and a lot of time to build up, or great ideas. You can't just expect to throw something together and then just make a bunch of money and then get out, especially if you're not passionate about it. If you're doing it for the money, people can tell, man, and it just doesn't work. Yeah.
It doesn't make enough sense just doing it for the money. I think that can be like, an element, like a motivating thing, like when you have a something that like that can be motivating, but I mean, to the point where it motivates you to do good work, I think is good. But there's definitely has to be like, that spirit has to be like the what gets you up in the morning, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not excited about it 6 months into the project, when it's getting stale and things are just, you have to fill out spreadsheets for 8 hours and you have to do all this mundane programming work and, things aren't going well. If the foundation of what you're working on, if the foundation isn't based in passion, isn't based in love for what you're doing, then you're not going to get through that. And it's no wonder that you don't get through it, because why would you? Why would you want to work on something that you're not passionate about when you have to fill out spreadsheets for 8 hours? And, making a game is fun. And yeah, people say, oh, that must be so fun. It is, but there's a lot of grueling tasks, especially with making an RPG, but that goes on behind the scenes. It's one of the most ambitious things you can do is make an RPG. It's so massive and so many different things. You're basically making like a life simulator, and you have to account for all these different things, and things never go as planned, and things always take longer than you expect them to. And there's so many different elements, and you plan and you plan. It doesn't matter how much you plan, because when you execute it, it ultimately does not come out the way that you thought it would. And it comes out in a different way. And you'd be like, okay, I guess this is how we're going to do it. And we need to make adjustments here and there. And it's unbelievably complicated.
You've got to have that. I get to make this horse armor in an hour once I'm done with all this BS stuff. And like, that just makes me like, you've got to have the passion. You got to have the passion.
Exactly. It's the foundation of all of it.
Yeah. And I've noticed, like, when I'm playing games, like, or even like how much, like, when it's just like exciting when you have like one thing that you're trying to like make, right? You're like, okay, I'm gonna put time into this, and then you just realize like I don't know. It's just it's very ambitious. What it sounds like.
It is. And I get Yeah, there's no short of people who call my ideas ambitious, but I think that's a good thing. And I'm not interested in going small. I want to have the most successful game on the Roblox platform. I want to use that to launch a more successful career in game development, and found a gaming company that really like Ubisoft or like any of these big companies. That's what I want to do. I want to become that. And we're starting from humble means, and we'll get there. But if my goal was just to, make a little money, well, that's not really a goal. That's just something you want to acquire. It's like a physical. I would think a goal is something that actually enhances you in some way. That would be my definition of it.
Okay, I was muted. But yeah, I think you definitely have to have something behind it. Even if like, oh, I guess like when I think of like, making money, it's like, okay, this is going to provide. Well, okay, so I think like just to I don't know why I'm defending it, but it's like, okay, so it seems like if you're like making money, you have to be making it in a honest way, but it's better than like doing nothing, right? Like it's better, and it gets you. I don't know why I'm defending money.
Well, there's nothing wrong with making money.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with making money. And I have to, I often struggle because I have to put in products that people purchase for money in my game for me to make money, right? I need to charge them something. It's free to play, but I charge. There's nothing wrong with making money, but you don't make money by going after to trying to make money. I mean, trying to make money doesn't make you money in most circumstances.
Right.
Providing a service makes you money. And something from The Go-Giver, which I just reread and had my company read, the first law of stratospheric success in that book, which is a great book, is give more in value than you take in payment. Mm-hmm. And if your goal is to just make money, then all of a sudden the consumer isn't somebody you're serving, it's somebody that you're trying to extract things from. And that totally changes the mindset. And when you're trying to extract something from somebody, they know.
Right.
They know when you're trying to extract something from somebody, and they won't give it to you.
Right.
But when you're trying to serve them and you're putting their needs first, and you're thinking, I'm trying to think of the game I want to play and the game people want to play, not just the game that makes the most money. I'm trying to make the game that's actually the most meaningful for people. That's my goal. So that subsequently makes money. Right? They go hand in hand. It's not like you choose to follow your passion or you choose to make money. No. In fact, they go hand in hand. When you choose to go after what you're good at and what you're motivated with, you make money because you're.
Well, when you go after what you're passionate, like even if sometimes it seems like even if you're not making your like the goal there is like living and bearing fruit rather than making money. Like that's one way. Like I would.
Right. The goal is wealth, not just money. Right. The goal is wealth, creating wealth for you and for people around you. And when you create wealth,
and then that translates to money. Right.
Yeah. A lot of the times it does. And when you look at let's look at somebody like Elon Musk. There's no doubt in me that what he does is what he's passionate about. It's what he wants to do. And that's why he's so successful, and he just got skyrocketed to the most wealthy person in the world. And he's genuine. He's authentic. I don't agree with everything he says and does. But the point of it is that he's a visionary, and when he sees something that he wants to do, he goes out and does it.
Right.
He doesn't worry about if it's profitable. Tesla made losses. I think it still makes losses. It's not a profitable, like Tesla is not a profitable venture, if that makes sense. The car company is not something that has been profitable for Elon over time. But at the same time, that's what has allowed him to create so much wealth. Because even though it's not a profitable idea because there's cheaper ways to make cars and there's cheaper ways to sell cars, people have become more attracted to it. And now in the last year, Tesla stock has shot up. And so all the losses he was making early on, people say, oh, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. He didn't care because eventually it did work. And it wasn't about making the money for him. The idea behind Tesla for him was providing a sustainable car for the future. And that's what his goal was. The goal wasn't to make money, right? And if it was, then he wouldn't have gotten anywhere. He would have just, as soon as they started making losses, he said, oh, this isn't going to work. I'll go move on to something else. And I could say the same thing, man. My company hasn't been making any revenue yet. The game's still in development, right? So I'm taking losses every month trying to fund the company. And if I think about the losses, just say, oh, it's not profitable after, 7 years of developing it, but 9 months of actually opening the game up to be played, I guess. So 9 months in and we're not making profits, I could say, oh, this is a catastrophe. I got to get out. Right. But that mentality is what most people take. And that's why most people don't actually achieve the success they want.
Right. That's a failing strategy, because it's just a matter of like overcoming adversity, and it's like that's pretty much the lesson there. Like, yeah, that's just a matter of overcoming.
And maybe your idea is bad, and maybe it won't make money ever, right? That's a possibility. But when you dwell on that and you're risk adverse, you're actually creating that future, and it's becoming more of an inevitability. So if you believe in your idea and you believe in what you're doing, great, go do it. But I don't care, because if I come back in 6 months, I want to see you doing that again. Or I literally don't, because people come, oh, I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to make this game. I want to do that. I'm like, great. I'll support you in any way you need. Let me know how I can support you. I'd love to help you out. But if in 6 months I come back and you say, oh, I wasn't getting the results I needed, and they give up on it, then obviously it failed. It's no,
for all intents and purposes, it was a bad idea because it didn't come into like existence.
Yeah, well, it was a bad idea. Maybe the idea wasn't bad. Maybe none of these ideas are bad necessarily. The execution and the dedication is what's bad, because people decide they hit one roadblock, which I've hit many, and I've screwed up and royally screwed up in so many ways, in so many justifications I have that I could have given up. And so many times where I was starting the project originally and people say, oh, it's never going to work. It's never going to work. Nobody's going to like it. All the time, hundreds of messages a day, constantly, just negative, berating me about it. And I had plenty of excuses to give up. And I still have plenty of excuses to give up. But now, months into it, people are finally starting to see my vision come in. And guess what? You can't make somebody see your vision. You can try to project your vision out in the world, and you can help people see it, but it's your vision. And they're not going to see it until it's actually fully manifested. And so the more it's become fully manifested, the less negative comments have gone in, and the more positive comments have come in, and the more messages of support. But I had to go through all the doubts, and I could not doubt for a second in my head that it was going to succeed. The whole time, I'm reaffirming to myself, this is going to succeed. They don't know what they're talking about. I know they don't know what they're talking about because I'm reading what they're saying, and they don't know what they're talking about. I'm still listening to their critical feedback for how to improve it. I'm not like ignoring everybody's feedback. But as far as when they say this isn't going to work, well, I know they're lying. They don't know because they're not seeing my vision. And I don't judge them because they have no reason to believe in my vision. They don't owe me anything. They can believe in my vision when it's manifested. I don't need their belief. But I think so many people rely on results, right? They rely on results when they want them. And like I have this friend who he's like, I want to start a Game of Thrones genre on Roblox. And this is just like a Game of Thrones community where they role play Game of Thrones. He's like, I want to make the best one. And there's a ton on the site. There's tons of different Game of Thrones games on Roblox, and they're all generically the same. And there's not really much difference between them.
I'm going to plug this in.
Go ahead.
Okay, continue.
So I was saying, I had this friend who I was actually mentoring, and he was in my development academy. He's a great guy. And he says, I want to start this Game of Thrones community on Roblox. And there's a bunch of them. So Roblox allows you to do anything. So a lot of people who are fans of stuff like Game of Thrones or Star Wars start up their own groups that are based around those. And so he's like, I want to make the best one. And I was like, okay, I think that idea has been done a lot of times. I don't think it's very creative. But if you do it better than anybody else, it'll be successful. And I'm like, but you have to make sure that if you commit to this, that you're all in. It can't be something that you're flippy floppy about, because you're just going to waste your time. So you need to think about if you want to actually do this. He's like, no, man, I want to do it. You know, very reassuring. And everybody says this, by the way. Every single person that ever comes to me with an idea always says, oh, I'm sure. Right. So yeah, he goes through with it, and he starts to build the places and stuff. And he shows me, I'm like, these aren't better than what I've seen. These aren't going to be the best. You know, what's your plan? And he kept working on them. And a couple months later, he just died off. And I haven't talked to him about it, but that's just what I imagine happened is, he just started to see how much work it was going to take, as well the fact that the results weren't coming in soon. It wasn't going to just be a 2-month project. It was going to be a 2-year project. And he got interested in something else. He was fickle. And so many people are fickle. Like, there's plenty of times where I thought, oh, I'd really like to make a Lord of the Rings game instead of a Third Crusade, right? Or something like that. But it doesn't matter, because when you make these decisions, you have to understand how much work goes into each one of them. And so I'm dedicated to the Third Crusade, and it's going to succeed or I'm going to die trying. That's my attitude. And there's no point in divergence, because anything diverging or any plan B or anything like that is going to just take away from the progress on the game that I've already spent 7 years on.
Right. Oh, so do you think there's any room for like, just like, okay, so if you have like doodling, like I don't know, like think of it as like doodling, like keeping your mind, like if, you're doing your game on the Third Crusade, and it's like, okay, if you have another idea, like you can almost either try and build it into the idea you're pursuing, or just like writing it down or doodling it somewhere. Or do you think like I don't know, what do you do with extra ideas, basically?
So our game's designed, luckily, that many of these extra ideas can be implemented in the game.
Right.
But certain things, it's a historical game, so certain things like magic, we just can't have. Although we have something that's going to be called Faith that will be somewhat similar to that. So when I get an idea for something else I want to do, I just can't put the energy into it.
Right.
Because when you're creating in your mind, when you're using your creative potential, which we all have, there's actually a finite amount of it. And so when I spend my creative potential on the Third Crusade, it makes the Third Crusade better. But if I instead say, oh, well, I'll do the Third Crusade, but also work on this and that. Okay, well, now my creative potential and my creative expression is being diverged into multiple streams. And the main stream is going to be less powerful. And actually, I'm taking away from the Third Crusade when I decided to work on something. This was the struggle with the academy, because I decided to start up the academy, but every day I spend working on the academy is a day I'm not working on the Third Crusade. But I've made the academy into something that I can give back. It's free. Anybody can come, and we encourage donations, and I teach like an hour a week. So I've managed it, but it was a huge investment to get it started. It was a huge investment to get it all set up, find instructors, all these things. So ultimately it took away from the Third Crusade in some ways, but I built it in a way that actually enhances the Third Crusade, because now I get to talk to developers all the time. If I need new developers, I have a whole academy full of them that I can recruit from. And plus I can actually share my knowledge with them and enhance my own skills, because teaching is one of the best ways to learn. So I would say, you know, if you're working on a project, let's say you want to make a game, right? You're working on a project. Before you start, think about it for a week. Do all the planning is necessary, and ask yourself, in 6 months, when this inevitably is taking longer than I think it will, and I'm not seeing the results yet, and I'm discouraged, am I still going to work on this? Am I still going to want to work on this? In a year, am I still going to want to work on this? In a year and a half? Well, you might say, well, I only want to make this game for 2 months. Well, bullshit. It's going to take longer probably, especially if you don't know what you're doing, especially if you have to teach yourself game development, especially if you don't have a team, right? You have no idea how long it's going to take. You don't have the expertise to know how long it's going to take, right? That's something that takes a long, long time to build up. So think, and this could be used for anything. Think about what you want to do and what you want to invest yourself, whether you're going to university, whether you're taking a job, whatever it is. If you're investing that stream of creative potential into something, think about it for a week. Do I want to do that? And think about it for a month before you put the work in. Because if you start to put the work in, you should not stop until it is done. Because if you give up halfway, it's a waste. That's when the real, like, failure isn't when things don't go as planned or when you have a setback. That's not failure. Failure is when you've worked on something and you give up because of a setback. When you fail to learn from failures, that is the true failure.
Right.
When you decide, oh, the community hates this update, which happens to me all the time. I release an update to the game and everybody floods my inbox. How could you do this? Is such a bad blah, 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 right? None of it's constructive. It's all negative. I guess some of it is constructive, but mostly negative. Overwhelmed, you know, I can feel my cortisol rising. It's so easy to just say, you know, well, fuck it, I'm done. But the problem is that was always, there's never going to be a time where you just have this perfect idea and it just flawlessly executed the whole way, and it's done perfectly on time, and everything goes perfectly, and there was never any hiccups, and you had no financial loss, and it was just all gains. That's not going to happen. That's a fairy tale. So if you're not willing to deal with those, then don't start the project. Find something that you know is worth, even though the Third Crusade isn't making money right now, even though that we've had plenty of failures and setbacks, it doesn't matter because I love doing it.
Right.
That's why I don't want to stop.
Right. And I think there is, like, trying to find, like, I would say, like, there's like trying to find that I would call it like an archetypal stream where you see how things should go and you try and implement it, and you know, you hit a positive feedback loop, like yes. Trying to find those and then being able to deal with like realities, like setbacks, basically. Also, yeah, exactly. Inevitably, and yeah. No, totally agree. Yeah,
and I would just say, I would never discourage anybody for trying to pursue what they want to pursue. But it's important to be realistic, because there's a reason, you know, the Pareto distribution, which I'm sure you've heard about, which is basically states that only a certain amount of percentage of people will be successful. Only a certain percentage of people will achieve what they want to achieve. So if you want to be in that percentage, and guess what? It's unfair, and it sucks that that's the way the world is. Whatever, that's how it is. So you can choose to be on the successful end or the non-successful end, and you can use that success to influence and help other people go up, or you can sit on the losing end and complain about it, right? So you have options. I'm trying to go for the successful end, but you have to know that the successful end takes sacrifice. And if you're not willing to go through those sacrifices for years, longer than you anticipated, and go through setbacks and trials and tribulations, and not just right now, you're like, oh yeah, man, I still want to do it. Well, bullshit, because 90% of the people who come to me and tell me that, when I look and check back on them in 6 months, like, yeah, I gave up on that. The successful people I know, the successful game developers I know, this one guy, his name's Raguzer is his username, and he dropped out of college, taught himself how to code, made one of the most successful RPGs on Roblox in 6 months. And that game makes a lot of money, and he's made a lot of money doing it, and he's very successful by any means. And guess what? He had a vision and a passion, and he didn't give up on it. And he didn't care what anybody else said. He didn't care what anybody else thought about his vision. He didn't care because he has very unique ideas about how games should be played. It's different than my ideas, but he's like, I don't want to give the players, one of his things is, I don't want to give the players any sort of tutorial. I'm going to drop them off in the world, and they're going to just have to figure it out. And everybody's like, that's not a good idea, man. You don't have to, that's stupid. It's been a huge hit. People love it. It's been a wild success. And he had the vision because he knew the game he wanted to play, right? I'm not going to make my game exactly like that. But the point is, it's not even the idea itself. It's the fact that he was committed to it. He had the vision, and he did it all by himself. And so when he started and he said, oh, I'm going to do this, and 6 months later you check in with him, oh, his game's done, and it's one of the top games on Roblox. He's making a bunch of money, and he did it without any programming knowledge prior, and he just went out and did it. That's what the successful attitude is.
Right.
And did he have doubts? And he had to drop out of college. He had to take huge risks, right? But if you want to take the island, sometimes you got to burn the boats.
Right. I've never heard that one.
It's a great little phrase I like to remind myself. And I always try to tell myself that, look, if this doesn't happen, if this doesn't work, you're screwed. There's no plan B. Like, I'm going to do, this is going to work. This is going to work. I'm going to die.
Wait,
that's my mentality.
I'm trying to get the logic of, if you want to take the island, burn the boats. So do you burn the boats so you just don't have an out?
Exactly. You don't have an out. If you don't, it's amazing what people will do if there's nothing but that to go forward. I experienced this when I was in wilderness and boarding school. Eventually it computes to these kids that, look, the only way I'm getting out of this is by the only way I'm getting out of this situation is by faking it till I make it, or doing the work. But either way, I'm doing the work. So because there is no out in that situation, when a kid gets sent to rehab, or a kid gets sent to a wilderness transformation area where they don't get to leave, they're in the middle of nowhere. They don't get to leave, right? You're either going to work on yourself, or you're going to stay here forever, is basically their mantra. And you could disagree with it. People disagree with it, but there's no doubt the kids do the work because there's no way for them to go. There's nothing for them to do. And that's where if you want to take the island, burn the boats. If you're trying to conquer an island and you have this army of men, and they know that those boats are right there, they could sail home and their wives are waiting for them, and they got pina coladas on the beach, and we don't take the island, it's no big deal. Well, guess what? That's in the back of their head the entire time that they're in the battle. That's in the back of their head the entire time when they're trying to do it. But if you burn the boats, if you take out the boats, there's no option of going home. You either win or you die, right? The level they're going to do, they're not going to half-ass it. They're going to go 100%. And that's exactly what happened to the Marines on Guadalcanal in World War II. The Navy got ambushed, and they had no evacuation. And so the Marines at Guadalcanal overcame amazing odds against the Japanese forces because they had nowhere to go. They were stuck. They had nowhere to go, man. And that was an island. So that's kind of a good historical reference as well.
That's almost, it's like a hilarious method that actually, like, man, man, that reaps results.
Well, and Shane, in reality, if this game doesn't work, am I going to starve to death? Probably not. But I don't even like talking about that. I don't like entertaining that. I don't know what's going to happen, right? My entire family could die in some horrendous accident. Everybody who's around me who has wealth that could support me could just catastrophically meet an end. This is possible, right? I have nobody to rely on but myself and this company. That my money could dry up. There could be a million different things that happen that could bring me towards disaster. And those things, given life, are actually likely to happen.
Right.
It's not like they will happen. The chances are fairly high that these things could happen.
But you got it. Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're living off a hedge fund, if your dad's a millionaire, it doesn't matter, right? Because if your mentality is, oh, it's fine if this doesn't work. Well, of course it's not going to work. Like that's obvious. You have to burn the boats. Burn the boats. In my mind, the boats are burned. There is no other alternative. People come to me, hey man, what if Credenzio Studios doesn't work out? Maybe you'd be a history professor or something. I'm like, it's going to work out. Like, I'm not going to talk about that. Why would I talk about that? Why would I put my creative energy into that and divert? And basically I'm asking for that thing to happen. Right? There's no contingency plan.
Right. Until, right. It's almost like until that is a reality, talking about it like there's no, like, this is what I'm doing. Like, and yes. There's right.
No negotiation. And it doesn't matter what other people are saying. It doesn't even matter what you think your situation is. Your mindset has to say this. You and your mind must be saying, this is do or die. This is survival. And so when I wake up at 5 a.m. and I want to go back to sleep, and I don't think I have that much work to do that day, and there's a million excuses I can say, right? That could be every day if I didn't have a do or die mentality, right? This is what allows me to work 7 days a week and 70-hour weeks, and on top of my morning routine and stuff like that. That's what allows me to do that. And people say, oh man, you need to slow down. You're going too hard. You need to take care of yourself. And maybe that's true, but I don't care. It's do or die right now for me. And that's what actually,
and in the
leads
end,
to success.
Yes. Yeah.
Think about this. So we live in a time, the wealthiest time ever. Shane, like, this is the wealthiest, most prosperous time in human history. I'm not talking about 2020 and 2021 because of the pandemic. I mean the 21st century. We have so much wealth. We have so much food. How does anybody get motivated? It's no surprise people have motivation troubles. Our grandparents, my grandparents, if they didn't work 70-hour weeks, if they didn't work until their backs broke, they would starve to death. That was do or die for them. They didn't have the luxury of having to create it as a mental exercise, right? That wasn't a luxury for them. It was reality. And that's how my grandparents achieved so many great things. That's how so many people's grandparents were so hard and achieved so many things. And their grandparents probably had to do things even worse, right? They probably even had to go through even worse times. We live in such a pampered society that you have to force yourself. You have to put yourself through suffering, because there's not enough suffering in life anymore naturally that's going to occur.
Right.
To that level.
Yeah. And it's actually like good for you. Surprisingly.
Yeah. That's what Goggins talks about, right? David Goggins is all about how you need to make yourself suffer.
Yeah. Putting yourself through it.
Exactly. And, people in the Soviet gulags in the 20th century, they didn't have to make themselves suffer. The people around them were doing that for them, right? People in medieval times, when they were starving to death 90% of the time, and they were peasants and they were living in awful conditions, they didn't have to go on a 30-mile run to make themselves suffer. No, they were suffering. But when you're living in the 21st century,
I remember my mom had told me, or someone had told me, that the concentration camps or the gulags, like, the suicide rate was oddly low.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. I wonder why that is. I've never heard that.
Well, I feel like it's because in the like brutal situations, like your brain's going to give you a sense of like meaning, or if you know the situation, like you're going to have something. It's going to turn on something that helps you like live.
Your body will adapt.
Right.
That's
right.
what Viktor Frankl wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning, which is him in Auschwitz, in concentration camps, and he talks about exactly that. Yeah, you need like, it's amazing how resilient the human mind is, and we kind of just create these situations today. You know, it's really hard not to complain just as a person, but when you kind of just observe what you're complaining about, it's like, man, this thermostat's like too high, it won't go down. And then you kind of put a little historical context on that.
Right.
It's so
back
absurd.
up. Like, yeah.
But the thing is
back
that
up for a second.
the brain doesn't register because the brain doesn't have the context. If you've lived this way your entire life, that, like, let's say getting an F in school is like a catastrophe or something, and you know, maybe it is, or let's say your dog dying is the worst thing that's ever happened to you, right? And that's terrible, and I'm not saying it's not terrible. But if you have no context of suffering to put that in perspective, that can destroy you, because your brain will think that's the worst suffering there ever could be, because it hasn't experienced it hasn't been through a gulag. So if you go through a terrible situation, sometimes it can make you strong that, you know, when something else happens, it's not like that thing doesn't suck, but it gives you the perspective. It's like, well, at least I'm not in Auschwitz right now, right? Because like if people got through that, it's like, well, they can get through anything. And you listen to like Holocaust story survivors, and they just go on to do crazy, amazing things because they have that perspective. And when things hit the fan, they're like, well, I'm not getting sent into a gas chamber right now. So I guess I could probably take this with a grain of salt, and figure out a path forward.
Yeah. Oh, so what did you think if you had to give a Man's Search for Meaning? I don't know if 1 through 10 scale is fair, but what'd you think of that one?
You know, I've read a lot of books in the last 2 years, and I really liked Man's Search for Meaning. I think the Gulag Archipelago had a much more profound impact on me.
Yeah.
It's hard to compare evils, but the level of severity and grotesqueness of what the Soviet state was doing, as described by Solzhenitsyn, was really, really impactful. And Ordinary Men was also very good. Both those Peterson recommends. And those are both, reading those, I read those 2 summers ago, and you can actually see me reading them in my morning routine video. I don't think I should ever have the right to complain about anything after reading those books. I'll just say that. And Man's Search for Meaning is right in there as well. I don't think that, and undoubtedly, you know, I still do, and I think it's pathetic of me, and I'm trying to work on it. But I'm not in the position to say, look, people in the 21st century are screwed up, or Gen Z is messed up. No, we're just victims of our culture. We're victims of prosperity. Like we have been, I hate to use the word victims, but we've been victimized by our soft culture, by the fact that we have so much. The amount of wealth is actually destroying us in a lot of ways. It's destroying us mentally. And it's not like depression rates and anxiety rates are going up. You think they would go down with wealth, but they're going up, right? And so there has to be some other way to provide that meaning for people. And I feel terrible. I was talking about this with my Uncle Kevin on my podcast. And I said, look, I think and he's a priest. And so he has very conventional views of human temptation. But I said, conventional in a religious sense, I guess. I said, you know, I think the hardest time ever to avoid sin is in the 21st century. I think this is the hardest time for human beings to find meaning and to transcend suffering, because the suffering has been abdicated as a context to provide us with something to give us perspective, I guess. It's not, and I hate saying this because it makes me think that I'm not saying people aren't suffering. I'm not saying the suffering isn't terrible. I'm just saying that the level of suffering being endured by per capita today is far less than it was 100 years ago, right? And I think that actually has consequences on the human psyche.
Well, and that's when you have to, like, that's why reading and remembering, like, times of, like, suffering is like important, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And absolutely. Like, and what Goggins says is put yourself through some suffering. Mm-hmm. Mandatory, right? And like obligatory, where you are choosing it, right?
Yes, choose your damn poison, or
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
you choose because look, you're gonna suffer either way, right? So there's nobody who gets through life without suffering, right? However, you can choose to take a path that makes you stronger, in a sense that you're actually able to withstand suffering.
Right. A path that makes you insufferable might not be the right word, but it's
more resilient.
Yeah.
A path that makes you more resilient, right?
Yeah. And to the common folk, you might end up insufferable, but
maybe, but I think that people are just afraid of their potentials. People resent people who actually try to transcend their own suffering. Like, oh, why isn't he just miserable like the rest of us? Why isn't he just content with that? Right? Or why are you working out so much? Why are you doing all this stuff? Why are you working so hard? And look, they have a point. At some point you need to relax and be a human being. But I found the times in my life where I've suffered the most are the times that I've learned the most and been able to grow the most. And the times where I've been able to become more than I was, in a sense. And that doesn't happen when you're comfortable. And all the cliches about that are true, man. Like, but people resent them because they're cliches. Well, it's like, just because it's a cliche doesn't mean it's not true. Like, diamonds are formed under pressure. That's a cliche, right? But that's also true, right? So you can focus on the cliche and be resentful, nihilistic, but the truth of the matter is it's not going to make your life any better.
Right. The person who's operating under that, he's he at least has a chance to be that diamond, and he's probably, like, happy about it, right? His like, it's like much better to be like
well, sometimes pressure forms you and sometimes it breaks you. And I attribute that to the mentality of the individual.
Right.
So sometimes people's suffering can turn them into a victim, and sometimes it can make them a champion, right? And it's the individual. It's not like you just going through suffering is going to make you this transcendent being, right? No, it's a matter of how you deal with it. How do you respond? Are you going to curse God? Are you going to curse the universe? Are you going to curse existence itself because things aren't going the way you wanted them to? And because you're angry? Is that what you're going to do? Or are you going to use it as a way to say, look, yeah, it's unfair. But to use another cliche, nobody said life was fair. Something my grandfather said to me about 1 million times, right? And along with a lot of other cliches. But that's true. And if you take on the attitude of, like, look, I'm not entitled to anything. You earn your keep here. And it doesn't matter what your circumstances, it doesn't matter where you come from. Like, you're not entitled to anything. And if you have an attitude of being grateful, an attitude of resiliency and responsibility, then that victim will disappear and you'll be so much happier and stronger and better and well suited. You won't even, as Peterson say, you won't recognize yourself.
Yeah. And you won't, it's like you won't, I almost want to say that you won't care as much that they're suffering because everything's so good, right?
Yeah, well, it's not like the suffering goes away, but your ability to, when something bad happens, you're so much more well equipped to handle it. It's like the level of suffering is still the same, and it might even get higher. But the difference is that the way you respond and the way that you've mentally calloused yourself, which is a term Goggins likes to use, is it's callousing your brain, callousing your mentality. Just like when you go and do pull-ups, your hands will start to hurt, but if you do them enough times, you'll start to form calluses, and they won't hurt anymore. The weight on your hands is the same.
Job is like a good one to point to when it comes to like suffering being like a cool thing. Like, how do you respond to that? And in the end, he gets like this vision or something, and I mean, that's an amazing. The story of Job is really interesting.
It's kind of like it's very realistic story, because I believe God makes a deal with the devil and says, I bet Job will be faithful to me, even if he's very prosperous and things are going well for him, but he'll still worship me even if I take all these things away. So he like sends a plague in, kills his livestock, kills his family, strikes him with disease. There's a flood or something. And Job still honors God's name. And it's not like that stuff didn't suck, but the attitude of Job versus the attitude that Satan said he would take, which is that he'll become resentful, he'll curse your name. As soon as the cards are down, he'll abandon all that gratitude. He's only grateful for you because you provided for him, right? And God was proven right from that individual, because Job still worshiped God and still said, can just be used as a metaphor, you don't even take it in a religious sense, is that when you're grateful, right? When you're grateful despite your suffering, well, that transcends your existence, right? That makes the suffering bearable. That makes your pain worth it, as opposed to you being ungrateful, you being a victim of your circumstance. That makes you miserable, because there's nothing you're aiming at. There's nothing you're aspiring to. You're just putting yourself deeper down towards a metaphorical and very real hell, I guess.
Right. There's nothing transcendent in it. There's nothing. Yeah. That.
But it is easy. It's easy to do. It's the default mode of being. The default mode of being is not Job. The default mode of being, in my opinion, is the chimp. The chimp inside us all. Well, we're not chimps ourselves, but the ape inside us all, that is thinking about themselves at all times. It's all ego, right? The gratitude is something you have to learn. It's something that you adapt to. It's not, I don't think it's a default mode of being necessarily to be like Job. It's something that you learn. It's something that you civilize yourself into doing, because if you just sit around whining, that makes things worse. And if you pay attention and you run it, and if you don't believe me, and if you're a nihilist and you just run an experiment and try to be grateful for a week versus your typical week where maybe you're not, and write a journal and record the results. Because the only real way I can tell you this is if you try it. So record the results and see the difference. If it doesn't work for you, then don't try it again. But if you earnestly try to be grateful, if you earnestly say, look, wake up every morning and write 3 things you're grateful for. Could be the worst day of your life. Something could have just terrible happened to you. Find a way to be grateful. And then compare that with the week that you're not. And it's going to be difficult not to see the results.
Right. I remember doing the gratitude journaling. I remember doing it and then just recommending it to, at least wanting to recommend it to everybody. It's
amazing.
Great exercise, yeah.
It's amazing. But there's a part of that nihilistic brain, which I used to be a nihilist. I used to be an atheist. I used to be a communist, for Christ's sake. So I've come a long ways. I wasn't born with this set of beliefs. It took a long, I would say I learned them through trial and error, and through suffering. I learned this way of being. It came to me through trials and tribulations. It didn't come to me through prosperity. Prosperity is what led me towards nihilism.
Yeah. It sounds arduous.
Well, I'm not going to sit here and claim like my life was that difficult, but I will say that the times in my life that I thought were difficult, given my perspective, shaped me into the person I am, and shaped me into the person that is not nihilistic and is grateful to existence. And I'm not perfect. And there's plenty of times when there's plenty of times where I do something terrible that I regret. And there's plenty of times when I have plenty of things to work on. Like I find myself being ungrateful all the time and being a victim and being complaining and for sure, but I know it's wrong. That's the difference. I've identified that mode of being is wrong, and I can reflect on it. Whereas in the past, my mode of thinking might have been, why would I be grateful? What do I have to be grateful for? Right. Which is just a terrible, like, I can't even imagine how somebody who's alive could have that thought. I know why they do, but it's just, existence is so magical, and there's so many things we don't understand. And it's just, existence itself is just a miracle. If you look around and your eyes are open, you could just tell what a miracle existence is. So to not be grateful for that, to find conflict with that, and to just to throw a pity party for yourself, well, it's no wonder why it makes your suffering worse. It's almost like existence is cursing you for you having the audacity to not be grateful. It's like the universe is saying, you have the audacity not to be grateful for everything I've created. Okay, well, I can make this a little worse.
Give you a reason, like your parents in the car when you're crying. I'll give you a reason to cry. Actually,
yes. Oh, that's great. Oh, I love that. I'll give you a reason to cry. That's great. Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? Because we all have plenty of things that we could complain about, but is it right to do so?
Right.
And not only is it right, does it help you?
Right.
And you should be thinking about it in a way of if it's right or wrong to complain. But if that's too moralistic for you, think about it in a way of, does this benefit me? Does complaining benefit me? And really evaluate it. Where am I before this complaint and where am I after? Right? And then compile that. Where am I after 10 complaints, 20 complaints? Right? And man, when you start to turn your brain on to how many times you complain, I'll speak for myself. I was amazed how much I complain. And my brain is still being programmed to catch it, right? Because it's subconscious in a lot of ways. You just complain and it just happens. And then it's not like it's all conscious decision to complain. Sometimes it's just subconscious. But when you start to program your brain to consciously catch your complaints, it's amazing what you find, because I found that I was just complaining all the time.
Right.
And what kind of life is that, man?
Sounds, that actually sounds endlessly helpful. Freaking have that, or just having that that awareness on, I guess.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, totally, man. Oh my gosh. Um, yeah. I've definitely. Well, I've found that like, well, I think like the opposite of like complaining. So the opposite, like you can stop complaining, but I think like saying yes to things and being able to like that's where you start doing a a moral good rather than just avoiding doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Like I remember just doing like track and field, like just saying yes without necessarily like thinking about, like when I would get offered to do events, it was just like yes, like before you had a chance to like say no, just like going
Yeah.
for these. I think that's when you start adding moral goods.
Let me ask you this. Can you be a victim of something if you're grateful for it?
Maybe from the outside, somebody would. Well, it's like I
You
think
personally, so let's say I punch you in the nose,
right,
right? And somehow you find a way to be grateful for that, right?
right.
And you say, well, actually, I like my nose being tilted to the left slightly. So thank you. Are you a victim of me? Because it sounds like I just did you a service.
I just made you the good guy.
Yes. But
Yeah.
that's the thing. If you want to get rid of the victim, be grateful, right? Because how can you be a victim of something if you're grateful for it? And so I try to find things that I hate in my back of my head. And go, oh, this is awful, right? And I write in my journal, I'm grateful for this.
Right.
I try to find a way. I'm grateful that, my car, I got in a car wreck. I'm grateful that, I lost a bunch of money this week. I'm grateful. And there's ways you can justify it. And you can find the light in the situations without having to be a polyamorist. You can still you can still be an optimist and find the light in these situations. And then guess what? Instead of dwelling on the bad of those situations, you can say, well, look, actually, this turns out for the better. This is the way things have to be, right? This is actually going to, in the end, me getting punched in the face by Kohlton, it taught me how to take a punch to the face. And now I know what that feels like. And I don't know if you've been punched in the face before, but you might never have known what that felt like, right?
Right.
And so, or maybe you didn't know what it felt like that time. And maybe you could say, oh, well, now this is great. Now I can say I've been punched in the face.
Right.
Right. You could come up with a million reasons to be grateful, but you could also come for a million reasons to resent me and to be, oh, I can't believe he punched me in the face. Oh my goodness, I'm such a victim. Right.
Right.
And that's true. It's like, yeah, I punched you in the face. That's fucked up. Right. But it doesn't help you to be remaining in that.
Yeah. And I would like, my motive being, it's like, I would much rather, like, if somebody punches me in the face, that doesn't take away like I still really want to like a person, like, and if I can like that's how I want to be. So then it's like,
well, it's not saying that you should like people who punch you in the face. That's not what I'm saying, right? But at the same time, you might need to defend yourself or whatever physically, but you could still, at the end, you don't have to tell that person thank you. But in your own mind, later when you're reflecting on it, instead of thinking, woe is me, you could take a personal responsibility path and say, I'm grateful this happened. And you might not even know why yet. Come up with a why, but if you can't, you don't need to come up with a why, because the why will manifest itself over time, and you might just need more time to reflect. I was really resentful towards my parents for sending me away for 8 years when I was a kid. I was really resentful for that. But now I've had the perspective, and now it's just one of the things I'm most grateful for, because it's what allowed me to change and grow the most. And me sitting there and being resentful about it didn't help anything. And now I'm more grateful for that than almost anything.
What do you want to like summarize? Like what?
Sure. When I was 13, I was depressed. and I was having trouble in schools, and I had anxiety. And my parents had experimented with my brother with sending him to various therapeutic wilderness areas and stuff like that. So they sent me to a wilderness treatment facility for, depressed and troubled kids. For 9 weeks, I was there in the middle of the woods with nobody but about the staff members and a few other kids. So like 10 people total. Didn't go into civilization. We hiked almost every day. No phones, no technology, just out in the wilderness. And that was like that was one of two of the most transformational experiences of my life. And afterwards, I got sent to a therapeutic boarding school for 9 months as a follow-up. And I learned a lot of discipline there, and I graduated in almost record time. I was the second fastest person to ever graduate from the program. It usually took people a year and a half. I got out in 9 months. And then from there, I went to a boarding school, a college prep school in Maine. And so I'm just moved back in with my parents now, save on company expenses while I'm getting started up. And I was thinking about it. I was like, I haven't lived with them since I was 13 years old, and I'm 23. It's been 10 years since I lived with my parents. And reflecting on all that, being away from my parents taught me how to be a man. It taught me so many things I'm grateful for. So even though in the time when I was the first week I was at Wilderness, I was crying and upset, and I was so mad at my parents for sending me there. But I had so much fun being out in the woods and learning all those wilderness things. And I made so many good friends from the boarding school afterwards and the college prep school afterwards. I learned how to live by myself and take care of myself. And that really started my path of transformation and led me down so many paths that I wouldn't be nearly the man I am today without those. I don't know where I'd be. I don't even want to think about where I'd be without those situations. So I'm very, very grateful for them. And I'm grateful for my parents for sending me there. And I wasn't always. I was resentful for a long time. But that's a synopsis of it. And so that suffering, that shape, I believe all children need something like that. I'm not saying all children should be sent away from their families, but I believe children need some sort of context in their life. Especially kids that live in, I came up in a wealthy family, especially kids that come up in wealthy families, especially kids that already have everything. If they don't have the context of what suffering is, if they don't have the context of what the world is and how to live by themselves, well, it's no wonder why so many successful people's children don't do anything with their lives.
Right. Even I think even just something like even maybe not maybe not 9 weeks, but even would that'd be
anything would be helpful, right? Some people could be transformed from a day. I mean, my dad always had me doing manual labor growing up. He didn't have to it's not like he had to have me doing that stuff, but he insisted. And I was never appreciative of it at the time. But now, whenever there's something manual labor related to do to help him out, I try to jump. I don't always do it. I'm not perfect, but I try to jump at the bit to help him because I know how much it taught me. Like, man, if he hadn't done that, I wouldn't know anything about hard work. And so much times I would resist it, right? Oh, like rake the beach or rake the pine needles or whatever, rake the leaves, chop the wood, mow the lawn, all this different stuff, clean the gutters, right? And I resisted it and I hated it, but it wasn't until I learned, hey, if I just embrace this, it gets done quicker. And I stopped torturing myself, right? Instead of being like, this sucks, like chopping the wood. Oh, this sucks, right? And I'm there all afternoon and it's mental torture and I hate it. Rather than just like, all right, this is what I got to do. I'm going to turn my brain off and just do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or even just like, I think there's like gratitude again, even like turning your brain on in the way where it's like, turning your brain on to how good it feels to be able to turn your brain off and do something just like rotary, like
you only learn that through intense physical labor, right? You don't learn that by doing nothing. It's only after you've done something arduous and physical that you learn that, oh, that's the key. I turn my brain off, right? I just get the thing done. I stop complaining about it internally and externally, and it gets done quicker. But when I resist it, it persists, which is Carl Rogers, I believe. So that's a quote, what you resist persists. And that's so true. So I would resent all sorts of chores. And I had to learn when I moved in with my uncle, when I was going to that boarding school for high school for 4 years, I moved in with my uncle because he lived nearby. And, you know, he was a big fan of chores. And he taught me the value of chores. And I hated it while I was there. But eventually I started to catch on that, look, if I actually just volunteer to do these things and I just do them and not have to be the guy that people have to drag out there to do these things, it's easier on me. It's easier on them, right? They're less suspicious of me because they don't think I'm just trying to get away from doing work all the time. In fact, it looks like I'm eager to do work because I am. And this last summer, me and my cousin went up to, my family has a lake cabin up in Maine. And typically it's like a whole bunch of work the whole family has to do to get it set up, because Maine has brutal winters, so there's sticks everywhere. You know, the property's a mess. So you have to clean it up. And me and my cousin just went up there, and we're the same age, and we just did it all by ourselves because nobody else came up because of COVID. And I loved it. And I was like, man, I've never thought doing chores at camp was fun. But all of a sudden something switched. And now I'm not just doing the things we need to do. I'm coming up with different tasks that nobody told me to do. No one's expecting me to do, but I see a need and I'm going to fill it.
Right. And it probably helped with a little bit of like novelty with nobody being there.
Oh, right? I mean, it's much easier to do it when you of your own initiative. That's why I would say, you know, if you're a kid or whatever, and you don't want to go shovel the deck after it snows or whatever, you don't want to shovel the driveway, just do it before your dad asks you, because it's going to be a lot easier when it's under. You can say, hey, I shoveled the driveway. And that way it wasn't he told you to, it was you did it yourself. And that's a lot more liberating in some ways. It makes you think like you have control over it.
Yeah. No, that's a great like start. Definitely.
So many kids need that, man. And yeah. I learned that's like becoming an adult. It's becoming a man, in my opinion. Right. And that's something that our society is lacking more and more. It's lacking more and more of that element of actually going through it to learn that process, because eventually if you don't do it, then you're never going to learn it, I guess.
Right.
You can't learn it by theorizing about it. Right. And some people never do. Like there's full grown adults. There's like 40-year-olds out there that haven't learned this.
Which is, it's odd because it just makes so much sense that it gets done quicker and it's
easier.
Yeah. Because
but you can't do that with a narcissistic attitude.
Enforcement, right? It's just,
you can't be nihilistic and narcissistic if you want to have that attitude, right? You have to actually adopt an attitude of responsibility and gratitude to get there. And so like the idea of being gracious and the idea of being grateful, these are self-evident through experience. Like I don't need to intellectualize to anybody why being grateful is better, because it just is. It's the truth. It's just self-evident. It reveals itself when you practice it. Whereas if you're nihilistic and you victimize yourself and you complain about everything, it'll be self-evident if you're paying attention how much worse off that makes you and how much harder it makes everything. But you have to be paying attention, because many people who have that attitude just think that that's just the way life is. And so they get more nihilistic and they get more resentful, and eventually they destroy themselves.
Right.
That's what happens. That's what happens to nihilists. They destroy themselves.
Yeah. So do you think like just starting that process of noticing, that's definitely, I think,
awareness.
Yeah. I think that's the start of like
anything. You can't change something if you're not aware of it.
Right.
awareness, my good friend, Fred Shoemaker, he's a golf instructor, teaches like spiritual methods of playing golf and like meditation oriented methods of playing golf. He just says awareness is curative. You don't need to do anything but be aware of something. If you're aware that you're complaining, every time you complain, you'll complain less if you think it's a problem, right? Does that make sense? And a lot of the times we do things, so many things subconsciously, we're not aware of things when we do them. You know, you're just not aware of most of the things you do. You're not aware that you're complaining half the time you are. So if you actually start to develop that awareness of when you're complaining and a light bulb goes off in your head every time you start to complain, then you can stop it. But if you're not aware of the complaining in the first place, how are you going to stop it?
Right.
That's why so many people have these blind spots.
Yeah. And then that awareness becomes more and more like subtle. Like you can start to catch things that are like small, like the impulse to start to like complain, or just small like internal movements, or I don't know exactly.
This is why great works of philosophy and theology and religion are so valuable, because they point out different areas in your life you might be lacking. Because you might not even know how you could get, like, you probably know how you could improve, but you probably don't know all the ways you could improve. And when you read it from like a book like the Bible, and let's take all the religious pretense and the belief in God out of it, which is necessary in some ways, but not necessary for this point. That if you just take all that out and read it as a book of advice, let's say, right? Which is how I started reading it. When I was an atheist, I started to look at it in that way. I said, I look at this as a book of advice, of wisdom of thousands of years people have found valuable. Oh, it turns out that a bunch of people come together and, the human experience dictates that if you sacrifice, you get rewarded. If you are grateful, you get rewarded. If you practice delayed gratification, you get rewarded. Now, I could just throw that out and say, it's all bullshit, right? But why not? I'll just try it. I'll try it. Oh, turns out this works. Maybe there's something more to this book. Right? Maybe there's something more, and you could take that with a Stoic philosopher or anybody. It doesn't have to be the Bible, right? But that, look at it from that way, and then you can start to be aware, am I practicing delayed gratification right now? Am I being grateful? Oh, it turns out I'm not. Turns out I'm being a victim. Turns out that I'm actually making myself worse right now. It turns out that I'm being insufferable to the people around me right now. But if you're not aware of that, you don't know it. Like, people who are insufferable don't know that they're insufferable most of the time. That's just who they are. And they don't recognize it. They don't have the awareness. Otherwise, they'd stop doing it. Most of the time, unless they enjoy it, which is another problem. If you enjoy being insufferable to others, then there's a whole other can of worms you probably have to open.
Right.
But I think most people would prefer to be good. I think most people prefer to take the right path and to alleviate others' suffering and their own suffering. So for them, practice awareness, and that will. Yeah, when you become aware of something, that's how you actually can take steps to fix it.
Yes, dude, this has been like really, really good stuff. I feel like, I don't know, like just thinking about like, well, I don't want to keep you from your stuff here.
As long as you want to ask questions, man, I'm here.
Okay, well, I was like, okay, so what do you think, like, the importance of, because you've got just like the importance of community. I feel like that's a question people are like asking more. Like when you were talking about, stories that are being told, it just made me think of like, that's like the stories in the Bible. Like I think that's why it was so important, why it continues to be important for people. Like I just thought of like, the image of people like telling stories with each other and like
Well,
Like,
it's especially relevant during COVID, isn't it?
yeah.
Because we're so separated from each other. Look, I was an atheist, and I resented Christianity. I resented Christians, and I had all the reasons to do it. I always thought very intelligent way. I had all the arguments, and I would usually strawman religion in my own ways. And I came to religious texts in a classroom that was supposed to be a secular view of the Bible, a secular reading of the Bible. And we read it, and we had atheists and Jews and Christians in there, and we read the Bible. And I just thought, when I signed up for that class, I said, well, look, if I talk so much shit about this book, I might as well read it. Right? And
were they teaching it like a literary perspective?
A literary perspective, although the teacher was Christian, I will say. He was doing it because he knew he was sly. He knew what he was doing. He knew that most modern people don't read the Bible. So he did it in a way that was like, well, do you want to know where all these references and literature come from? Do you want to know where all these things, they come from this one book. It happens to be the book that founded our entire civilization. So maybe we should read it in school, right?
Right.
You don't need to look at it from a religious perspective. It kind of makes sense. So my challenge as an atheist was, well, I'm going to at least read this so I can critique it accurately. And then I read it, and I found that all the critiques I had were pretty much invalid. And it had extreme, because they weren't founded in something I actually knew. It was just founded in speculation.
Right.
And so I read it.
So your teacher effectively Jesus smuggled
Jesus into the Bible? I guess so. And I would always get into arguments with my uncle, who's a priest and all that things, but I was always questioning. And I guess that's what allowed me to change my mind. I was constantly questioning others' beliefs and my own. And so I questioned my own beliefs. And I thought they were right. And I didn't convert after day one. I didn't convert at all. I actually just came to understanding of the beliefs. And I started to value them as stories, kind of how Peterson talks about, right? What is the value in the story of Job, right? Because you don't need to have the God context there necessarily. Like, you don't need to say, oh, I believe in this big flying man in the sky, which is what atheists think that all Christians believe. Oh, I believe in this big flying man in the sky that rules all. To get value out of the biblical stories. You can get value out of the biblical stories no matter who you are. You can be an atheist no matter who you are. And these stories have
actually weirdly it ties into something that's been like talked about on the Discord recently. But continue.
Oh yeah, I was just saying that until I read it, I said, okay, this actually, like, the story of Exodus really spoke to me. David and Goliath speaks to me. All of them, a lot of them speak to me. And some of them I'm a little bit like, I'm not quite sure what this is saying, but I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So, like, let's take the story of David and Goliath. Is that not an intrinsic human story? The story of, like, somebody that is down and out, the underdog, overcoming insurmountable odds. That just speaks to humanity.
Right.
You can abandon the dogmatic part of religion and still get something out of that story. You don't need to go listen to everything the Pope says and become a devout Catholic to get value out of the story of David and Goliath.
Right. The underdog who's also morally upstanding.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. The underdog who, through faith and through moral standing, overcomes insurmountable odds. That's something that speaks to humanity all over the place. And you can tell because, when you're watching a sports game, an atheist watching a sports game will automatically root for the underdog if he has no preference team. All right. That's just default human conditioning. Like 90% of people will do that. Right. They want the person who's down out. And me, as somebody who's hated Tom Brady his entire career and resented Tom Brady, I find myself rooting for Tom Brady in the upcoming Super Bowl because he's the underdog against the Kansas City Chiefs. Right. So that's crazy phenomenon. And that's something that people lack that these stories, look, it's fine if you're not a Christian. It's fine if you're not religious. It's fine if you're an atheist. It doesn't matter to me. But at least give these stories are something that civilization has come up with and determined this is the pinnacle of our literature. This is the pinnacle of what makes us human. And so to just throw that away because of the Enlightenment, or to throw that away because we went to the moon.
Right.
It's childish.
It's give God his due, rather than give the devil his due. Like, give God his due. Yeah. Like, once here.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't even look, I personally, I believe in God. I personally consider myself a Christian, although I don't go to church every Sunday, and I don't necessarily consider myself as a particular type of Christian, although I was baptized as an Anglican. And I've only really accepted this in the last year or so, but I would be willing to say that publicly. I have a lot of different beliefs, but what I would say is that you don't even need to come out and say, look, I believe in God or whatever, but maybe to say that, look, there's something to these stories that transcends humanity, right? And that sort of is a higher power, and you don't need to make it doesn't need to become that. I'm always careful with this because atheists always like to throw dogma at they always like to yell dogma at everything. So when you say God or you say have a higher power, then they just say, well, I don't need one of those. And even though I believe you do, and everybody does have one, even though they think they don't, like science for atheists is a higher power, although many of them don't accept that. They look at it as a higher power. Take the higher power equation out of it and just read the stories as stories. You don't need to take them literally. You don't need to believe that Moses parted the Red Sea. You don't need to believe that, God sent a fire tornado to cast the Egyptians out. Like, you don't need to believe those literally happened to get value out of the stories. And I won't say whether I believe they literally happened or not, because I don't think it matters. I think that people get obsessed with, did this actually occur? Rather than what's the value of the story? Because whether or not God exists is irrelevant to the point that believing in God and prescribing to values, in prescribing to certain religious values, improves your life, right? And so, like Peterson says, and I've quoted him a million times and I'll continue to do so, I act as if God exists because my life is better, essentially, to paraphrase him, right? I act as if he exists because it improves my life. I don't need to get into an argument with an atheist about how old the earth is because I'm not a fundamentalist. I don't need to get in an argument with an atheist about how this line in the Bible isn't scientifically accurate, because it doesn't matter to the context that, guess what? Just like that scientific truth is real, the truth behind the story of David and Goliath is true too. It's a metaphorical truth, and it's just as powerful as that scientific truth. It doesn't mean either one's better. Scientific truth is great, and I love, and science is awesome. It's given us a ton of things, but we can't just throw out metaphorical truth because it can't be proven by our modern scientific methods that we worship as if they're a new religion.
Right. And you have to it's basic. It's just like you have to know how to act with these scientific truths. You have to know how to them. And so that's when you can take a biblical story and just applying that to today. I guess when you see symbols for technology in the Bible, you can just think about them as if they were here today. What's a good, I guess,
when you look at something in the Bible, right, that throws a red flag out, says this doesn't fit with my modern moral conception. This doesn't fit with what the scientific literature is saying, right? Stop reading it at face value, because it's not, literary text is not meant to be read at face value. It's meant to be interpreted. So it's not, the physical words are not what is important. What the words are telling you, what's behind the words, that's what's important. And that's what so many people miss in the modern century, because they just look at everything from a materialistic point of view, which has no room for humanity or spirit or soul. It has no room for music. It has no room for so many things that we can't explain, no room for consciousness, right? And it just says, well, if I can't materialistically explain this, then therefore it's invalid, and everything associated with it is invalid. And there's nothing that you can use this to make it practical because it's not scientifically backed. And great, science is great. We all love science. We live in the 21st century. We live in a world of science. Science is amazing, but it is not God. Science is not the foundation of the universe. Science is not the only thing that makes you human. Like that, there is so much more that makes you human than what you can see. And you know that when you read a story and it speaks to you. And when you know that when you listen to music, and there's no rational reason why music should be good. There's no rational reason. There's no pragmatic reason. There's no materialistic reason, but the music speaks to you and the music sounds good. And there's no Darwinian explanation for that.
Sorry. No, I totally, totally agree. That's like you. Yeah, just the point that meaning is inexplicable, and sometimes that's like you can try, but if you just find meaning in the meaning, like there's nothing, I guess, the modern materialist frame can.
The modern materialist frame has allowed us to advance technologically in so many ways, but it hasn't allowed us to advance spiritually. It hasn't made people necessarily less anxious or depressed. In fact, it seems that it's making it worse. It hasn't provided meaning for people's lives. So we kind of had a tendency nowadays through the scientific method to rationalize and explain everything with logic. And I'm guilty of this as well. And the truth of the matter is that you don't even want to do that. Like you lose humanity when you do that. You lose an element that is so intrinsic to human beings that you're not a human anymore. when you take out religion, when you take out spirituality, when you take out music, when you take out things like this and abandon it for some sort of hedonistic, nihilistic worldview, you lose humanity. And that's something that we should be very afraid of, in my opinion.
Right. And it like explaining everything, like just trying to understand, like this is more like I'm thinking about the divine logos as opposed to like logic, right? They're similar. And then I'm also thinking about, you losing humanity to logic, I guess, or to like over explaining. But I think there's a right way to, it's just finding the right way to explain things or
yeah. Well, people are religious whether they think they are or not. They just prescribe their religious zealotry to something else. For many atheists, they prescribe it to science, and they worship science, and they worship many other things. Are postmodernists. That's like a religion to some people, postmodernism. And it's like, okay, you're going to be religious. Atheists cringe when I say that, but you're going to be religious. You're going to ascribe that religious zealotry to something. You're going to ascribe it to an ideology. You're going to ascribe it to a religion. You're going to subscribe it to a belief, whatever, right? So you might as well make sure that whatever you're ascribing it to is valuable. And that's what I would say. I'm not telling anybody that they should be a Christian or a Muslim or not be an atheist or whatever. But consider the fact that there's concrete evidence that people are religious and people act irrationally. Human beings are not rational. They act irrationally. They're not driven by logic. They're driven by emotion. So you need a binding ethic to get you through life. And I personally think, for me, along with other things, the Bible is a great binding ethic for me, along with other things. And along with Stoic philosophy, along with lectures from Jordan Peterson, along with all these other things.
Right.
But be very careful with the idea that you aren't religious. Be very careful, because you are. And if you don't think you are, then you're missing out of what you're actually worshiping. And I invite people to actually analyze what they think they're worshiping in their lives, because
you're
going to be worshiping something.
Right. And you would probably have a better time worshiping the thing that you don't know you're worshiping if you at least admitted you were like.
It might be a little bit more, it might be more meaningful, right? If you can actually have intent behind what you're worshiping. I'm worshiping this for this reason, rather than subconsciously worshiping something that you're not even conscious of. It's a subconscious belief, and it dictates your actions and the way you view the world without you understanding it.
Right. Okay, dude, I've got, there's so much to chew on there, but dude, do you want to like let people know where they can like find any of your stuff or?
Sure. I have a YouTube channel called A Beautiful Life. It has a triangle logo with ABL in the center. It's only got 100 subscribers or so it's probably hard to find. I also have a YouTube channel for Credenzio Studios, which has 1,000 subs, like 1,000.2 subs, which is easier to find, which I post content related to my video game. I'm on Twitter at Credenzio, capital S. That's Credenzio, Credenzio. And you can play my Roblox game at the Third Crusade Roblox, or the Third Crusade Reforged Roblox. And I have a Discord server for that as well. And I have a Discord server for A Beautiful Life, which you can join.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll put all that in the description.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Dude,
awesome
thank
combo.
you so much, Kohlton.
Yeah. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. All right, man. Yeah, have a good night.
Yeah, you too, Shane. Thanks.
Thank you.